Perfect. Okay, again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are going to be talking about maintaining habitability. This is an open webinar for both our tenants and our landlords, so it will be broad in that way. But we're happy to have you all here, and we actually have a guest speaker here from the Multifamily Housing and Inspection Department. So we'll have an opportunity for you all to ask questions, and so we'll just get started in a moment. We have Anna, who will be doing our translations this afternoon.
Buenas tardes y muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. Esta tarde vamos a tener como presentador al señor Jim, que es del Departamento de Inspección de la Ciudad. Y esta reunión es tanto como para los inquilinos y también como los propietarios.
Every time I try to do this, my clicker stops working. There we go. Okay, so again, my name is Andrea Kennedy. I work with the City of Mountain View with the Rent Stabilization Program. We have we have James or Jim Olson, who works with the City of Mountain View's Multifamily Housing Inspection Department. So he does a lot of the inspections on your multifamily buildings. So he is our person who's going to be answering a lot of questions this afternoon. So I hope you have a lot for him, because it's nice that we have an expert here with us today. That's you. And then we have Ana Jimenez, who will be translating for us.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Andrea Kennedy del Departamento de Estabilización de la Renta. También tenemos al señor James Olsen, que también le llamamos Jim. Él es el experto en el Departamento de Inspección y está aquí para contestar cualquier pregunta que ustedes tengan, y también su servidora como intérprete, Ana Jiménez de la ciudad.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we got a request for transcription, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. Okay, so I put that on. You may have to go onto your Zoom and click the transcription button and turn it on. So, and then you'll be able to see it.
Estamos prendiendo el botón, pero usted va a parecer que tiene que ir al Zoom y prenderlo de su parte por su computadora para que lo pueda mirar.
Okay, so we'll bring Jim back in when we open up for questions, but I'll take over for now. So just as a quick reminder, we always want to mention that city staff is not able to offer any sort of legal advice, but we are here to offer tips and best practices about maintaining habitability and different city programs.
Y solo como recordatorio, el personal de la ciudad no puede ofrecer consejo legal. Sin embargo, podemos ofrecer consejos, mejores prácticas sobre el mantenimiento de la habitabilidad y los programas de la ciudad.
All right, so we'll start off with the big question, habitability, what is it?
Vamos a comenzar con la pregunta habitabilidad. ¿Qué es lo que es?
Okay, so to a lot of us, especially both our tenants and our landlords, we think about habitability, and it sort of makes us think, what does it look like when we're in our house and we know that it's clean and that it's safe and that everything's in good working condition? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And those different factors, make something feel like a home. So we're going to be talking about why it's so important to make sure that we have a safe and habitable space to call home.
Esta pregunta es tanto para los inquilinos como para los propietarios. ¿Qué es lo que se siente un hogar que es habitable? ¿Cómo se siente limpio? ¿Se siente seguro? ¿Y todo está funcionando apropiadamente?
All right, so we'll start first by looking at what habitability means technically. And there's a couple different levels, I guess, of law that talk about habitability. So we have state law and we also have our local code. So state law, it has a definition of like implied warranty of habitability. And so what it does is define certain standards of habitability that a landlord needs to meet to classify the property as being a habitable property. And so the further down you go with the local code, and then even further with the City of Mountain View's rent stabilization program, it provides more clarity and detail about these habitability standards.
Primero vamos a hablar de lo que es la habitabilidad bajo la ley. Hay diferentes niveles, por ejemplo, está del lado del Estado, lo que garantiza y identifica la habitabilidad y define ciertas normas de habitabilidad que los propietarios deben cumplir. También está la ley del código local, el que proporciona la claridad y detalles sobre las normas de habitabilidad en su ciudad.
Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper now. So we'll start with some state law and the California Civil Code.
Ahora vamos a estar hablando acerca de la ley del Estado y del Código Civil de California.
And so for purposes of not dragging out our webinar too long, we're going to keep it pretty high level. We'll go over some key points and some main factors that would qualify a property for being habitable. But just for your reference, here is the section of the Civil Code and sort of the health and safety standards. If you want to write that down and do some more in-depth dive on your own, you can do that. Or if you want to make an appointment with our staff, we can dive into that a little bit deeper.
Vamos a tratar de mantener este seminario un poco corto, así que vamos a estarles mostrando los números de códigos los cuales ustedes pueden apuntar y pueden buscar más información o nos pueden contactar y nosotros les podemos ayudar a explicarles un poco más en detalle de lo que se trata. Ahorita lo que vamos a estar es repasando los puntos claves y factores de lo que es la habitabilidad de una vivienda.
All right, so when we're talking about the state law and our landlord responsibilities, I think we might have a couple landlords on the line, but just so for everybody's information, landlords must provide rental units that are in habitable condition. And so there was a quick picture, here we go, of some of those key things. So we're looking at the condition of our pipes, if we have hot water, how our cold water is. We're looking at, maybe vermin or insects. We're looking at temperature, and we're also looking at the condition of the buildings. Are there any holes? Are our doors in proper condition? Are our windows in proper condition? Do all of our doors lock? We're looking at a lot of things like that when we're talking about the landlord's responsibility to keep the property habitable.
Ahora vamos a estar hablando de lo que son las responsabilidades del propietario. Por ejemplo, estamos hablando acerca de si en su vivienda tiene usted agua caliente, agua fría, si las puertas se cierran apropiadamente, las ventanas, si hay hoyos en las paredes y cosas así.
And so one of the main things just to keep in mind is that the building really needs to provide a space where the landlord needs to provide a space where the tenant and their family can remain safe and healthy. And especially during COVID, this was really important that we had places where we could sanitize and be clean and have running water and have access to all of these different types of things in our home that are going to keep us healthy and safe to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So it's very important to maintain a habitable property.
Es muy importante mantener una unidad habitable, especialmente ahora en los tiempos de COVID, en donde necesitamos todos tener agua limpia, poder tener una vivienda limpia para no transmitir el COVID a otros.
Okay, and now the landlord is not the only person who is responsible for maintaining a property. Tenants also have a responsibility when they're renting a unit from their landlord. So Tenants must take reasonable care of their rental unit and the common areas. They are expected to keep them in good condition, and they're also responsible for any damage caused by themselves, their children, their pets, especially their pets, and their guests. I have a Rottweiler dog and he breaks everything, so I can relate to that.
Y al igual los inquilinos también tienen responsabilidades, deben tener un cuidado en la unidad de alquiler, en las zonas comunes, mantener un buen estado a la vivienda. El inquilino es responsable de los daños causados por el inquilino, sus invitados, niños y especialmente las mascotas.
All right, so we'll look at now the city of Mountain View.
Ahora vamos a hablar acerca de la ciudad de Mountain View.
All right, again, here we'll just put up the chapter of the City of Mountain View Municipal Code for you, chapter 25. And if you're interested in looking at our rent stabilization law, we mention habitability in section, sorry, that should be 1707F. So not 1706, that would be 1707.
Y aquí les vamos a mostrar nuevamente en donde ustedes pueden encontrar más información. Sería el capítulo 25 de la estabilización del alquiler de Mountain View. Y cometimos un error, está en el artículo 1707F.
Okay, so we'll look now at sort of the 5 key topics here in the Mountain View Municipal Code, sort of our multifamily housing inspection program that we're trying to accomplish here relating to habitability. So number one, the goal is to ensure that there's proper maintenance on buildings and our multifamily housing buildings in particular. Can I go each one?
Ahora vamos a estar hablando acerca del Código Municipal de Mountain View, del programa de inspección de viviendas multifamiliares. Aquí estamos mirando 5. La primera, que es garantizar el mantenimiento adecuado, aplicar los objetivos de la vivienda de la ciudad. Y 3, preservar y proteger las viviendas. 4, promover la salud, la seguridad del bienestar y evitar el deterioro y la plaga.
All right, and so I'll just catch up. So number 2, that's implementing the city's housing goals. 3, preserving and protecting our multifamily housing. 4, promote health and safety and welfare to the community of Mountain View. 5, avoid deterioration and blight in the city. So those are sort of the main goals that are listed here in the City of Mountain View's municipal code.
Y estas vendrían siendo las 5 metas principales de la ciudad de el Código de Mountain View.
Okay, so now we'll go over what are different violations, different code violations, what's inspected, what are some of the more common issues that we see, and then we're going to open it up for you to ask questions to Jim, who is joining us from our multifamily inspection team.
Ahora vamos a estar hablando de qué es lo que se inspecciona. También van a tener la oportunidad de hacerle preguntas al señor Jim, que viene del Departamento de Inspección de la ciudad.
Okay, so what is inspection? What is usually inspected during one of these inspections? So they're going to inspect the electrical in the building to make sure it meets electrical standards, that fire and safety standards are met, general interior standards, and they'll also inspect the building to make sure that the outside or the exterior of the building is safe and well maintained.
¿Y qué es lo que se inspecciona? Regularmente se inspeccionan las normas eléctricas, las normas de seguridad contra incendios, normas generales del interior y normas generales del exterior.
So there are also 2 different classification or types of violations that, depending on what the issue is or what needs to be fixed, it could be classified as a serious violation, or it could be classified as a less serious violation. And you will notice that they are all serious and they all need to be fixed because we do want our buildings up to code, but some are definitely more serious and very urgent. So those would be the more serious types.
Y de acuerdo a las infracciones, tenemos las infracciones que son serias, otras que no son tan serias. Sin embargo, todas las infracciones deben de ser corregidas para la seguridad de las personas que viven en su vivienda.
Okay, so now let's take a look at what are the most common types of serious violations. So here's a little list, and we do want to disclaim here that this is not a complete list. We do have a handout that we'll make sure we email to everybody that has a more extensive list on it, but here are some of the most common types. So to start, some serious violations would be the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors missing, or if they are failing to work. If our fire extinguishers are outdated or they're not being serviced as they should be. If there are combustibles stored too close to a wall-mounted heater, that's very dangerous. Any sort of exposed electrical wiring, not good. If there are holes in specific areas of the walls or in the building systems, or if there is work done without a required building permit, that's very serious as well. And then finally on our list here is the water heater is missing its required septic strap, seismic straps. Sorry, thank you, Jim.
Esto sería una corta lista de lo que son las infracciones más comunes, que son más serias. Sin embargo, sí necesitamos avisarles que esta no es toda la lista. Tenemos un folleto con una lista más extensa. En esta lista estamos mirando que algunas de las infracciones serias serían cuando faltan o fallan detectores de humo de monóxido de carbono, exteriores que están desactualizados o no han sido revisados, combustibles almacenados demasiado cerca a un colector montado en la pared, cables eléctricos expuestos, agujeros en zonas específicas de las paredes y sistemas de edificio, trabajos realizados sin permisos de construcción necesarios y calentador de agua sin correas químicas requeridas.
Okay, now we'll take a look at some of the less serious or sometimes called non-serious types of violations. So this would be if there were outlets or surge protectors or extension cords used incorrectly. I can just imagine that most of us have probably been guilty of using an extension cord incorrectly, but Jim maybe can talk a little bit more about it when he gets up here. It is very dangerous. So it's definitely something I have worked on to stop doing. Another less serious violation is if the toilet is not securely mounted. There is damage to the exterior trim, damage or missing or non-maintained faucets, sinks, pipes, or drains, missing window screens, circuit breakers that are not marked, or exterior lighting that's not working as it's supposed to be.
Y algunas de las infracciones que son más comunes, pero menos graves, incluye algo que todos regularmente hacemos, que es muy peligroso, es enchufes, protectores de sobreextensión, cables de extensión utilizados incorrectamente, los inodoros no están bien montados al suelo, revestimientos exteriores dañados, grifos, regadores, tuberías, desagües dañados o ausentes y sin mantenimiento, faltan mosqueteras en las ventanas, interruptor de no marcado, las luces exteriores no funcionan apropiadamente.
All right, so as you may have gathered, there are a lot of different laws, state laws and local laws that are defining what it means to be habitable. They're defining what needs to be in working condition to make sure the property is safe and healthy. And so we're going to pause here and we're going to bring in Jim, and he's going to answer any questions you might have about common violations, or if you're experiencing anything in your housing, or if you have any specific questions for him. So come on up, Jim.
Well, you touched on the electrical a little bit. So I'm gonna give a little demonstration that we run into a lot of.
All right, and so everyone knows here, most of you are with us on Zoom. So-
See this, okay?
Yeah,
This is-
you can come
That's
closer,
fine.
maybe.
This is a standard extension cord. You find them hardware stores everywhere. These are actually not allowed. These are temporary. You're doing Christmas lights or something for a short time. You have to vacuum something. These are okay. That's fine. But they tend to overheat and create a fire, and it could become a hazard. In place of that,
We'll have Anna translate that really quick.
Lo que les estamos mostrando ahora es algo que usamos comúnmente para algo temporal, que puede ser para un árbol de Navidad durante las fiestas navideñas, pero son muy peligrosos porque si se dejan por largo tiempo puede causar un incendio.
okay. In place of that, the code requires a surge protector. Similar outlets, except it has an on-off reset button. So should it overload, should get too much power going in there, it's gonna cut off the power to all the circuits. So this is the code compliant. Don't worry about the length. These lengths come to 12 feet long. There's no reason not to get one. You'll be able to put it somewhere in the property to fit in, where you have to get to.
Lo que les estamos mostrando es algo que es más seguro. Por ejemplo, se puede comprar más largo, más corto, y cuando hay un riesgo de que pueda haber un incendio o se esté calentando demasiado, se apaga automáticamente.
Okay. And another couple of things we run into a lot lately, actually. We have these little cheaters that people use to convert your old two-prong to a three-prong, except that it provides no safety and they do melt down.
Este es un ejemplo de un enchufe que tiene dos entradas y para reemplazarlo con la de tres. Sin embargo, estos son peligrosos porque se calientan y pueden incendiarse.
And if you need, obviously you have like if you have your surge protector, they have a ground, so you have to have the three. You can't use these in place. You'd have to have your landlord put in a GFCI outlet to give you the protection if there's no ground available. In one of the older buildings, a lot of them don't have a ground. So I'm not telling you to replace all of them. Pick one that's an obvious one in the room, maybe where the TV is next to the bed, and they should put a GFCI in for safety for you and obviously their investment of their property.
En lugar de reemplazarlos con estos que se pueden comprar en la tienda, es importante que se les diga al propietario que les reemplacen uno por la JFI, porque serán más seguros a estar poniendo estos enchufes de tres, y el otro se debería de instalar en un lugar en donde van a tener la mayoría de su televisión o donde van a necesitar más la electricidad.
And the other thing we run into a lot of these are the same thing, kind of a cheater. We call them a cheater because it goes from the ground, but has a three. It's still a multi-plug. These are not code compliant. They do make a multi-plug that has a surge protector. I didn't have one, unfortunately, to show you. Those are code compliant. Long as there's a surge protection, you can have more than one on an outlet. If not, you have to reduce it down to one.
Este es otro que vemos comúnmente, que también son peligrosos. Se puede instalar uno, pero este tiene tres, entonces los hace peligrosos.
All right, thank you. So I know I can definitely say I've done some of those naughty things that I was not supposed to do. But we want to open it up for questions. We have Jim here with us for just this section. So if you have any questions for him, now would be the time to ask before he takes off.
Y ahora sería un buen momento para aprovechar que tenemos aquí a Jen. Él estará aquí para esta sección y si tienen alguna pregunta, sería bueno que le hicieran ahora que él está aquí.
And I do just want to mention before I read some of the questions we have here is that you can type your question in the Q&A. You can type your question in the chat, or if you prefer, raise your hand and we can allow you to speak.
Y para recordarles, pueden poner sus preguntas en el QIA o pueden levantar la mano y hacer la pregunta directamente.
Perfect. Okay, let me excuse my face in the screen. Okay, one question is asking, when do these inspections occur?
There are two types of inspections for properties that are previously marked serious, which means they have serious violations. and previous ones are non-serious. The serious take place every 5 years or so, and the non-serious every 8 years. Now, with COVID, everything's been kind of backlogged, so those numbers are a little off. So I can't give the exact time of when a building in particular will be inspected.
Hay dos tipos de inspecciones, una que se considera seria, que viene siendo cada 5 años, y la que no es tan seria viene siendo cada 8 años. Sin embargo, debido a COVID, esto puede tomar más tiempo de lo normal.
Now, let me add, if you have, or you believe you have serious violations in your unit, you can call for an inspection. And it'd be just that unit, obviously, it wouldn't be the entire building, but we can still do that for you. You can reach out to CSFRA, they'll be able to arrange it, and we can do that as well.
Y tenemos que mencionar que si usted cree que tiene una de estas infracciones serias en su vivienda, usted puede hablar con el Departamento de Estabilización de la Renta y podemos darle una cita para que se le inspeccione su unidad.
Okay, great question. Do you have any other questions in the Q&A or the chats? I know, oh, I see we have one caller on the phone. If you have any questions, you can dial *9 and feel free to ask your question in English or Spanish.
La persona que está en el teléfono puede marcar *9 y puede hacer la pregunta en inglés o en español.
I do want to just, before we let Jim go, I want to emphasize again that he is here just for now and he will be leaving after this section. So it is a privilege to have the actual building inspector with us. So if you have a question now, you know, I would hope you would be able to ask it.
Y solo para recordarles que es un placer y un privilegio tener aquí a Jim. Si les gustaría hacerle alguna pregunta directamente antes de que se vaya, ese sería un buen momento.
All right, I'll wait one more second. Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, good question. So here's a question. Can the inspection request be confidential?
It can be, except that if you have a violation, they know where the violation came from, unit 1 or whatever, they're going to probably know you called on it. So it can be confidential to a point, but they're going to probably be able to figure it out.
La pregunta es si se puede hacer, se puede pedir una inspección y la persona se puede mantener en el anonimato, y pues se puede. Sin embargo, si hay alguna infracción, el propietario se dará cuenta debido a que se le va a avisar acerca de la infracción. Entonces lo más probable es que sí se van a dar cuenta que usted lleva.
And just to add on to that, we will also be talking a little bit later about how retaliation is not allowed. So if you are having a habitability issue and you report that and you know are aiming to get that corrected, the landlord is not able to retaliate or try to evict you or terminate you from your tenancy just for trying to get your property up to the code standards.
Más tarde vamos a hablar un poco acerca de la ley que protege a las personas que hacen un informe, piden una inspección, porque no puede haber una retaliación por parte de los propietarios, no pueden desalojarlo, ni tener ningún tipo de acción negativa contra de usted por hacer un reporte.
Follow-up question to that. Couldn't the inspector say it was a routine inspection?
Not exactly, because routine inspection, we contact the landlord in advance and we'd be going into all the units of the building.
Y la pregunta es si se puede llamar y decir que, por ejemplo, es una inspección de norma, y la respuesta sería no, porque regularmente lo que hacemos es contactar al propietario y estaríamos inspeccionando todas las unidades, no solamente una.
Now, we are talking about in-unit inspections only right now. If they did an exterior, yeah, it could be confidential. We wouldn't know who, called. They wouldn't know either. We're only talking about the in-unit ones would be the ones you would say it's confidential, but it'd be figured out.
Si es una inspección en donde se necesita hacer la inspección adentro de la unidad, sería difícil de mantenerlo sin decir el nombre de la persona, pero si es una inspección afuera del edificio sí se puede hacer porque no sabrían quién llamó.
And Jim, would part of that be because if you did inspect the unit and you found something, a serious violation, you would be obligated and required
yeah,
to.
Any
Good.
violation, you're serious, non-serious, we're
Right.
still gonna note anything we see, we're gonna give it to the landlord. And like I said, they'll know what unit is, it's not hard to figure out if only
Right.
unit one gets inspected. Because like I said, the usual process every 5 to 8 years, and we contact the landlord or owner ahead of time to make arrangements to be there on site during the inspection process.
El proceso normal es de 5 a 8 años. Entonces, si se hace una inspección y se le debe de notificar al propietario que debe hacer estos arreglos, sería muy fácil de saber que se envió a la ciudad por parte del inquilino.
All right, any other questions about, oh, I see one here, thank you. Oh, good question. Question asking, are your apartment complex inspections scheduled, published anywhere? So can people see when the inspections are gonna take
No,
place?
there's no actual published schedule we have exactly. Even that, even like say we're gonna have a scheduled inspection, we have to make phone calls, so nothing is really set in stone half the time until like a week or two before. Because we have to get a hold of, the owner has to get a hold of, the manager has to get a hold of every tenant, give them a 72-hour notice, or we're gonna enter their unit. So there's a little bit of a process. So we've never had a way of scheduling it that far out in advance.
La pregunta es si es publicado la agenda de cuándo se van a hacer estas inspecciones. Regularmente no se publican porque hay cambios en las fechas, de una semana a 2 semanas puede cambiar la fecha, entonces no se publica.
Now, on a side note, you can inquire like what year the next inspection is going to be. That's fine, but we don't have exact date in that year it's going to be taking place.
Se puede preguntar en qué año sigue la inspección nueva, sin embargo no se puede decir exactamente cuándo, qué fecha.
All right, if I don't see any other questions, we'll go ahead and let Jim go. Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much for coming. It's always a pleasure. And as he mentioned, if you are experiencing anything in your particular unit, oh, we might have another question. I will have our contact information up at the end. You can reach out to us and we can set up time for you to schedule an inspection.
Muchísimas gracias. Jim se va a ir, pero les vamos a dejar el contacto de él al final de la presentación. Ustedes se pueden comunicar con nuestra oficina y nosotros nos podemos contactar con él.
Okay, we did get another question in. The question is asking, can a complex, I think an apartment complex inspection be requested anonymously with notice to the landlord?
You can ask about it, but in the sense we're going to go through all the units, we kind of want to know what the issue is systemic, is it just your unit alone? And like we said, if we could fit in that year, maybe we can move it up a little bit. If it's a known habitability issue and you believe that yours and other units are affected, you can reach out, we can see what the scheduling on that could be. There is some flexibility in scheduling, obviously. And we do prioritize if there's a property that has, if someone calls and says, we have this issue and we know it's gonna be coming up that year, we will sometimes reach out ahead of time and try to manage them to get them on a schedule earlier.
La pregunta es si se puede hacer, requerir una inspección anónimamente para toda la unidad. ¿Se puede? La respuesta es se puede, si es que esta inspección ya han recurrido los años y ya les tocaba la inspección de cualquier manera. Sin embargo, si usted siente que usted necesita una inspección en su unidad debido a algo que no es seguro, que necesita atención inmediata, entonces sería mejor que se llamara y pidiera la inspección directamente a su unidad.
All right, great question. We'll wait just one more second. Let's see if we have anything else. Let me check to see if I have any hands, right? Or again, if you're on the phone, you can dial *9.
Nuevamente, si están por teléfono, pueden marcar estrella 9.
All right, it looks like that is all for our questions on this section. So we're gonna go ahead and let Jim go.
Okay. Thanks, pleasure being here. Always don't feel shy, get a hold of her, me, or somebody if you have a question,
Yeah.
habitability issue. We'll take care of it.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Jim nos recuerda que no tengan pena, si necesitan contactarlo, pueden llamar a la oficina y los podemos conectar con él.
All right, so let me go ahead and start sharing the screen again. Should I turn it on behind us? Okay. So perfect. I appreciate everyone's question. So we're gonna go a little bit more in detail about why it's important to maintain your habitability on the property. And then tenant responsibility, landlord responsibility, and what you can do if you're having an issue.
Muchísimas gracias por las preguntas anteriores. Ahora nos gustaría hablar un poco más de por qué es tan importante mantener la habitabilidad, cuáles son las responsabilidades de los inquilinos y de los propietarios.
Okay. So the importance of maintaining habitability. So the community spaces and close living conditions are going to impact public health. Again, like I was saying, during COVID, it's very important to have a safe and habitable space to keep cleanly and sanitized, and also to be able to social distance when needed. So that's very important, that number one. And then number two here, we're going to be looking at our landlords. So for our landlords, rent can only be increased if the property is in compliance with the law. So you have to be up to standard with code and health and safety code. So if you're not able to increase rent on any of your units. Also for our landlords, you may be exposing yourself to financial and legal risk if you're not maintaining your property. So we'll talk a little bit about it in a second, but if there are major habitability issues, the tenants may withhold the rent, or you may be at risk for them looking into a lawsuit. And then number four, we're going to be looking here at our tenants. So it's important for our tenants to take proper care of their unit, because otherwise they may face eviction if they don't do their part to keep their home clean and safe.
Ahora vamos a hablar de la importancia de mantener una unidad habitable. Los espacios comunitarios y las condiciones de vida cercanas repercutan en la salud pública, especialmente en estos tiempos que estamos pasando ahora. También los propietarios y los alquileres se pueden aumentar solo si se cumple con la ley. Y número 3, los propietarios, existen riesgos financieros y legales al no mantener la propiedad de acuerdo al código de la ciudad. Y cuarto, los inquilinos pueden enfrentarse a un desalojo si no ponen de su parte y mantienen la unidad limpia y segura.
Okay, so speaking about responsibilities, we're going to look here a little bit at tenant responsibilities. So tenants, again, they must take reasonable care of their rental unit and the common areas. They must keep them in good condition. The tenant, again, is also responsible for damage caused by the tenant or their family, guests, children, or pets.
Ahora vamos a hablar de las responsabilidades de los inquilinos. Los inquilinos deben cuidar razonablemente la unidad de cualquier y todas las zonas comunes y mantener en buen estado. El inquilino es responsable de los daños causados por los inquilinos, los invitados, los niños y las mascotas.
Okay, so let's look at damage caused by the tenant. So if the tenants are causing damage to the unit or their guests, their children, or their pets, the landlord is still technically required to make those repairs. However, the landlord can hold the tenant liable for the cost of those repairs, or hold them responsible for the cost of those repairs. So the tenant may be denied any rent reductions if they're trying to get a rent reduction because there's the habitability issue. They might be denied that if they were actually the ones at fault for that damage.
Y ahora vamos a hablar de los daños que son causados por los inquilinos. El propietario continúa siendo responsable, obligado de hacer las reparaciones. El propietario puede hacer responsable al inquilino de los costes de las reparaciones y el inquilino puede negarse a la reducción del alquiler por los daños causados por el inquilino.
Okay, and so there might be other consequences for tenants if they are responsible for some of this damage. So the landlord may actually be able to evict that tenant if they're the ones who caused the damage or cause a nuisance or otherwise violate any terms of the rental agreement. So oftentimes, if there's an animal who's caused major damage to the unit, that may be considered a violation of the lease, and the landlord could look towards evicting the tenant. And so I'll go over this quickly, but if that is the case, the landlord is required first to give a notice to cease or a warning to the tenant to have them solve that problem before they can actually serve a termination notice.
Otras repercusiones son los propietarios pueden desalojar a los inquilinos si causan molestias o incumplen las condiciones de contrato del alquiler. Por ejemplo, si una persona tiene una mascota y esta mascota causa muchos daños en la propiedad, el inquilino tendrá que ser responsable. Sin embargo, el propietario debe emitir primero una advertencia por escrito de desalojo o de cese y informar a los inquilinos que pueden solicitar adaptaciones razonables.
And I'll just mention also that I encourage both our landlords and our tenants who may be listening, if this situation is happening for you and you're a landlord who's maybe going to start serving a termination notice or has questions about the notice to cease, I encourage you to reach out to us. Or if you're a tenant and you've received a notice to cease or you've received a termination notice, I also encourage you to reach out to us and we can sort of review the next steps.
Si usted se encuentra en la situación en donde usted es el propietario y usted va a estar emitiendo un aviso de desalojo o de cese, o si usted es el inquilino y le han dado uno de esos avisos, pueden venir a nuestras oficinas y les podemos ayudar a mirar cuál sería el próximo paso.
All right, so now we'll look at sort of what are the next steps once we've identified that there is an issue.
Ahora vamos a hablar de qué es lo que podemos hacer cuando hay uno de estos problemas.
All right, again, just as a reminder, the landlord's responsibility is to make sure that each rental unit is habitable.
Y como un recordatorio, los propietarios deben proporcionar unidades de alquiler en condiciones habitables.
Okay. So this one here is sort of talking to tenants and how they can address habitability problems. So the first thing that's not on here that I want to make sure that I mention is once you realize that there is a problem in your rental unit, you really want to make sure that you let your landlord know as soon as possible so that they can start fixing it right away and the problem doesn't linger on and get worse. So that one is not mentioned here, but that's probably the most important thing. So if you do that and there still continues to be a problem, you can request an inspection. And then that's when we'll coordinate with Jim to come out and do a thorough inspection of the unit. Also, you can consider filing a petition for downward adjustment of rent. So if you have an issue, you can ask for a rent reduction for the duration of the time that the issue exists. If you feel comfortable and confident to repair the problem yourself, you can go ahead and do that and deduct the cost of the repair from your rent. But again, if you're going to do something like that, very important to have that in writing. You can also speak with a lawyer about your options. You can come to our Housing and Eviction Help Center if you want to go ahead and talk to a lawyer. And you can also utilize your right to vacate, which we'll talk about in just a second.
Ahora vamos a estar hablando de los problemas de habitabilidad, pero una cosa que no está mencionada y que es muy, muy importante es cuando usted se dé cuenta que algo está mal en su unidad, que necesita un reparo, es importante que usted de inmediato hable con el arrendador para que le comience a hacer los arreglos de inmediato, en lugar de esperarse a que este problema se haga peor y peor. Principalmente, si por ejemplo usted le pide al arrendador que le haga unos arreglos, pero el problema continúa, entonces es cuando se puede pedir una inspección. Nosotros coordinaremos con Jim para que se le haga una inspección en la unidad y también se puede considerar la posibilidad de presentar una petición de disminución de alquiler, reparar los problemas y deducir los costos. También se puede utilizar el derecho de desocupar por su cuenta y también hablar con un abogado. Si usted necesita hablar con un abogado, puede venir con nosotros y nosotros los podemos conectar.
Okay, so let's look at requesting an inspection. I know that Jim talked about this, so we'll go over kind of quickly here. But first, on the bottom step, you'll see the inspection frequency. So similar what Jim mentioned, there can be inspections at the most frequent every 4 years, but those are for properties that have serious violations. Our properties that are classified as less serious, there can be up to 6 years in between the inspection time. So that's why it's important if you have an issue in your unit that you want to contact us so we can request an inspection in between those times. Excuse me. And so the inspector, once they come to your unit, they can cite the landlord for any violations, and they're going to require that those code violations are corrected, and they will follow up on that to make sure that they are corrected. And so anytime that you have an inspection, there will be an inspection report, and it will detail out any of the issues or the things that require correction to your unit. And you can use that inspection report as evidence in your petition, or maybe as evidence in a termination case or eviction case.
De la manera que se solicita una inspección, regularmente para las viviendas que no tienen infracciones serias sería cada 4 años. Para las viviendas que tienen infracciones más serias sería, perdón, al revés, las que tienen infracciones serias sería cada 4 años y las que no son serias sería cada 6 años. Entonces, el inspector puede indicar las infracciones y requerir que se hagan las correcciones. Después, al solicitante que pidió la petición, se le puede dar la lista de las infracciones que el inspector considera que se deben de corregir. Estas también se pueden utilizar en una petición si se va a pedir que se haga una reducción del alquiler debido a las infracciones.
Okay, so again, if there is a code violation or any issue in your units, something's broken, something's not working, something that you know is just making it so that your unit is not habitable. There maybe hasn't been hot water for a couple weeks, or there's an issue with the safety of the balcony, some things like that. You can actually consider filing a petition for our tenants, a tenant petition for a failure of the landlord to maintain habitable premise. So that is an option, but that is only an option for those units covered by our rent stabilization program. So once you think about filing a petition and you go ahead and move forward with that, you can actually request a settlement conference where you can discuss the reduction of rent from the time period that the landlord knew about the problem until the problem is corrected. And again, this is why it's so important to let your landlord know about the problem right when you become aware of it. And so if you decide to request a settlement conference, but you don't come to an agreement, or if you just choose not to have a settlement conference, you can move forward in a formal hearing where you actually have a hearing officer who will look at the evidence and the petition, and they'll issue a decision to either grant or deny your request for a rent reduction. And once that decision comes through, either party, the landlord or the tenant, has the option to appeal the decision if they don't agree with that. And that appeal will go directly to our rental housing committee, and it will move forward from there. But again, that's a lot of detail, so it's okay if you don't remember that. If you're having an issue and you're thinking about filing a petition, just come and talk to the staff and we can walk you through it.
Aquí les vamos a hablar un poco de qué es lo que se debe hacer si usted está considerando la posibilidad de presentar una petición. Si usted piensa que en su vivienda hay un problema serio, por ejemplo, no tiene agua caliente, usted siente que el balcón de su casa no está, no se siente seguro. Para las unidades que están cubiertas, se pueden tomar los pasos de una petición. El inquilino puede presentar la petición por falta de mantenimiento de un local habitable, por reducción de los servicios de mantenimiento. También puede solicitar una reducción de condiciones de conciliación para discutir la de reducción del alquiler desde el momento en que el propietario tuvo el conocimiento del problema hasta que lo haya corregido. En la audiencia formal, las partes pueden presentar pruebas al oficial de audiencia que luego emite una decisión y cualquiera de las partes puede apelar la decisión por parte del comité de vivienda de alquiler. Estas son muchos los detalles. Si ustedes piensan que les gustaría presentar una petición, pueden venir a la oficina y nosotros se los podemos explicar. Yeah.
Okay, so let's look now at repair issues and deducting the cost. So in order for the tenant to use this option, the defect in the unit must be serious and directly related to health and safety. So you want to be careful that you don't use the withholding of rent when it's not a very big serious issue. But you can think about doing this when it is something that is considered directly related to the health and safety of the people in the unit. Right, so again, the tenant must not be responsible for causing this damage. The tenant has to give the landlord a reasonable amount of time to repair the problem on their own before they decide to take the repairs into their own hands. And so again, as with all things, it's very important to provide any notice in writing. It's just a better way that you can prove and date and have a record of the things that you know need to be fixed and when you let the landlord know about it. All right, and so if you are withholding rent because of there's an issue, it is important also to note that this cannot be used more than twice in a 12-month period. So again, this is an option, but I do want to say that we hope that you come to us before maybe you think about using this option. There are some protections with our rent stabilization law, hopefully that we can sort of intervene before it gets to this point.
Para las reparaciones y el problema de la deducción de los costos, el defecto debe ser grave y estar directamente relacionado con la salud y la seguridad. El inquilino no debe ser responsable de causar los problemas. El inquilino debe dar al propietario un plazo razonable por escrito y con la fecha. El inquilino debe de notificar al propietario preferiblemente por escrito y tener la intención, si es que tiene la intención de reparar y reducir el costo, el inquilino no puede utilizar el recurso de reparación y deducción más de 2 veces de un periodo de 12 meses. Entonces, si usted piensa que hay alguna dificultad, algún problema en su vivienda y por esta razón usted no va a pagar la renta, es preferible que usted venga a nuestra oficina y hable con nosotros si es que este es un camino que usted va a tomar.
Okay, again, there is always the option to speak with a lawyer. So this can go, obviously for our tenants or our landlords, but we encourage the tenants to document any issues that they may be having, because they can actually use that documentation as a part of their defense, just in case it gets to the point where there's going to be an eviction in court. So other things to consider both for our tenants and our landlords is that constructive evictions are not allowed. So anytime there's an eviction, it has to go through the proper channels. It has to go through court. If the landlord is doing something that makes the property uninhabitable, that's called a constructive eviction, and that's not allowed. So for example, if the landlord turns the water off, and so it just makes it impossible for you to live there, that's illegal. So if that happens, definitely come to us. If you're a landlord, definitely don't do it. All right, so another thing, non-compliance with the CSFRA. So if the landlord is not in compliance with a hearing officer decision, you definitely want to come and reach out to our office. But again, you can talk to a lawyer, and that can be used as a defense in an eviction court. And then finally, but very important, retaliatory evictions are not allowed. So the landlords are not allowed to retaliate against the tenant for using their rights and demanding that a property is in good health and safety and is up to code. So if you're facing any of that stuff, you can come speak to us, speak to a lawyer, and we can try to work it out.
Y por supuesto, esta información es tanto para los inquilinos como los propietarios. Si usted tiene alguna pregunta, puede venir a la oficina y puede conectarse con los abogados. La documentación del inquilino puede utilizarse como parte de su defensa en contra de un desalojo o en los tribunales si es que él es desalojado. También el desalojo constructivo no es permitido. Usted demuestra que los problemas graves de habitabilidad disminuyen para obligarle a salir legalmente. Por ejemplo, un propietario que va y le apaga el agua caliente al inquilino para que se vaya. Esto es ilegal. También está el cumplimiento de la ley de estabilización de la renta de Mountain View. El propietario, si no cumplió con la decisión del oficial de audiencia, y también no pueden haber represalias en contra de el inquilino. El arrendador debe presentar un desalojo en respuesta, no puede dar un desalojo en respuesta a una petición de corrección de problemas de habitabilidad por parte de una inspección.
Okay, so now let's look at the tenant's right to vacate in a case where there are serious habitability issues. So a lot of times we're on a lease, maybe it's 12 months, maybe it's 6 months. However, if there is a serious habitability problem in your unit, you do have the right to break your lease. And so but again, you want to make sure you have this all documented in writing, taking pictures of your situation, but you will not be held accountable for that unpaid rent for the remainder of the tenancy. Also, if you're on a month-to-month lease, so just every month you are not on a lease, but you're still renting, you can also break that month-to-month lease, so you're not obligated to provide the 30-day notice that you usually would be required to give. So again, each situation is different, so you want to come and talk to us or obtain legal advice for the situation. We can connect you with some legal services here at our office. Since staff is not able to give legal advice, we can give you a referral. And ultimately, oftentimes, the decision is going to come down to a court deciding.
Y también usted tiene derecho de desalojar. Si usted tiene un contrato de 1 año, usted tiene derecho a romper el contrato de arrendamiento. No hay responsabilidad para las rentas impagadas de los meses restantes del arrendamiento. Si usted está de mes a mes, tiene el derecho a poner fin al arrendamiento de mes a mes, y no hay obligación de avisar con 30 días de antelación. Sin embargo, es importante que ustedes hablen con un abogado, ya que nosotros abogados no les podemos dar un consejo legal. Sería importante que hablaran con un abogado primero antes de hacer alguno de estos pasos.
Okay, so again, addressing our habitability issues. Here's some things we want to highlight. Again, I probably said this a million times, but because I mean it. So document and communicate the issues that you're having in your unit in writing. And you can also back that up with photos or videos just to really capture the issue that you're having in your unit. So again, always contact us. You can learn more about your rights by contacting the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline or visiting us in the library for the Housing and Eviction Help Center. We also have a mediation program where two parties can come together and try to resolve their problems. And finally, again, you can speak with a lawyer.
Y para hablar un poco de lo que es de cómo solucionar los problemas de habitabilidad, es importante, muy importante documentar por escrito, tomar fotografías y videos. Es importante que usted conozca sus derechos. Puede venir a la oficina o a la biblioteca. También puede contactarse con un abogado. También tenemos los servicios de mediación para tratar de resolver el problema. Y también, como les habíamos mencionado, pueden venir y hablar con un abogado para recibir un consejo legal.
Okay, so another thing while you're documenting and while you're thinking about communicating these issues, either to your tenant or to your landlord, because this goes both ways, you want to remember some communication skills. So you just want to remember to communicate calmly and be very clear and direct about what's going on, but also be mindful of your tone that you're using in your communication, right? So we want to be respectful and we want to make sure the relationship continues to work and last. Because I definitely am a big advocate of the more communication between the landlord and the tenant, really the better. All right, again, I don't know how many times I can say this. So write it down. So write it in a letter or write it in an email and document it in writing. And again, you can attach photos and videos to help prove your point. All right, and so finally, if you do talk verbally only about the issue, it is a good idea at least to follow up with a written summary of what you've talked about. So at least that way, even if you started off talking in person, which is never a bad thing, you can have a written summary of what you talked about. Okay, and again, if you're a tenant and your landlord doesn't respond, a tenant or a landlord, and your tenant doesn't respond, you can also follow up with an inspection by our multifamily housing inspection department. All right, and again, just one more tip when documenting, document everything chronologically. So make sure you're dating and time stamping all of your documentation. The more specific you can be, the better, and the more examples you can give, the better.
Y pues soy una persona que cree verdaderamente que entre más comunicación entre el arrendador, propietario, el propietario, arrendador, haya esta comunicación abierta, es mucho mejor. Recuerde de comunicar con calma y con mucha claridad. Escriba una carta o un correo electrónico para documentar su problema. Y si, por ejemplo, usted habla con el arrendador acerca de algún problema y todo esto es verbalmente en persona, lo que usted puede hacer es escribir un resumen de la conversación que ya tuvieron. Si el propietario o el inquilino no responde, considere la posibilidad de solicitar una inspección de la ciudad y documente todo cronológicamente, utilice fechas y horas. Eso es muy importante.
All right, so now we're just wrapping up. So one of the programs that Mountain View offers, which is 100% free for all of the residents of Mountain View, or all of our business owners or landlords who own property in the city of Mountain View, is our mediation program. It's a wonderful program where tenants and landlords, or even neighbors and neighbors, can sit down with trained mediators and discuss the issues that they're having, discuss what needs to be repaired, and hopefully come up with a solution that works for both people. So it's totally confidential. And what we've seen is that when two parties sit down together to talk about their issue, they have over a 95% success rate of coming up with some sort of solution.
Y algo para considerar, el servicio de mediación de Mountain View es completamente gratis para las personas que viven en Mountain View. Esto se le daría a un mediador que está capacitado para reunirse con usted y con el arrendador o un vecino. Si usted tiene un problema, digamos, con sus vecinos, lo que nosotros hemos mirado es que cuando las dos partes se sientan a hablar del problema, 95% del tiempo hay un porcentaje de éxito.
And then there at the bottom is the mediation information here if you're interested in reaching out.
Ahí está la información del departamento de mediación si ustedes les gustaría contactarlos.
All right, and just some final thoughts before we open up for our last Q&A. And this goes for both our tenants and our landlords who are with us on this call. Perform a really thorough walkthrough inspection. And you want to do this at both the beginning and the end of the tenancy. So you want to document the condition of the unit. A lot of times there's a checklist you can go through, and you can take photos and videos of the condition of the unit. And I actually suggest that both the tenants and the landlords take pictures and videos so that everybody knows what the condition was before and after the tenancy is over. So the other thing that can be done is consider renter's insurance. Usually it's pretty affordable. A lot of times we already have like car insurance, and it can just be tacked on as part of your insurance package. So it's just a good thing to have just in case there is any damage that can be kind of costly. It's a good safety. And then the last part would be utilizing mediation. And again, this just is a proactive way to resolve disputes. And it can be done relatively quickly, which is nice. It's less adversarial, and it improves the relationship between the tenant and the landlord.
Y ya como reflexiones finales, realice una inspección muy detallada de cuando usted recién entra a la unidad, y eso es algo que usted le recomienda al propietario, hacerlo igual como al inquilino. Documente el estado de la unidad, haga una lista de la comprobación y tome fotos y videos. También algo que es muy económico y fácil de hacer es tener una aseguranza para que proteja los daños y los bienes personales en la vivienda. Se puede a veces agregar hasta a la aseguranza de su auto, y también se puede utilizar los servicios de mediación para resolver de una forma proactiva los conflictos entre el arrendador, el arrendatario, y es menos adverso, regularmente funciona muy bien.
All right, and then finally, just remember to talk with your neighbors, talk with your landlords. You can always come and talk to us. Again, more communication, the better. And us here in the rent stabilization program or at the Housing and Eviction Help Center, we're here to help our tenant and our landlord community through all things related to being a renter or being a landlord. So we really encourage you to come and talk to us.
Y recuerde que estamos aquí para ayudarle tanto a los inquilinos como a los propietarios. Venga, hable con nosotros. También puede ir a la oficina de la estabilización de la renta de Mountain View. Estamos aquí para servirles.
Okay, so we'll just open up for any final questions. Here's our contact information, our phone number, and our email, as well as our office address. And then on the other side, you can see the Housing and Eviction Help Center. Today is one of those days, but we're here at the library every first and third Thursday from 1 to 5. We're on the second floor program room.
Aquí está la información de la oficina. También tiene la información del Housing and Eviction Center. Estamos aquí el primer jueves y el tercer jueves en la biblioteca de Mountain View.
And so I will just say, as I'm waiting for questions to come in, that we will be emailing a copy of this presentation, the recording, and some of the additional handouts to everyone who registered.
Y antes de irnos, queremos saber si tienen alguna pregunta y también les estaremos enviando esta presentación a todas las personas que estuvieron esta tarde.
All right, so are there any final questions? Again, you can type them in the Q&A or raise your hand.
Si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, lo puede poner en el QIA o puede levantar la mano.
So the question is asking, is our office open to the public?
La pregunta es si la oficina está abierta al público.
Yes, our office is open to the public. You can come visit us at 298 Escuela Avenue from 9 to 5.
La respuesta es sí, estamos abiertos al público en el 298 Escuela Avenue de 9 a 5, de lunes a viernes.
And we do always have someone, usually, I don't want to say always, but for the most part, we have someone there who also speaks Spanish.
Regularmente tenemos a alguien que habla español.
Any other questions before we log off? I appreciate you hanging in. I know that was kind of long.
Gracias por estar con nosotros. Esta presentación estuvo algo larga.
Okay, I don't see any, so I'll go ahead and end for this evening. Just thank you everyone for joining. Again, I want to thank Jim for being our guest speaker, and as always, thank Anna for translating.
Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Le damos las gracias al señor Jem y a la señora Ana.
Have a good night.